Good afternoon, this is Brian. Today is a very warm and sunny Saturday, March 26th, 2022. I'm in the Santa Ana Mountains of the Cleveland National Forest along North Main Divide Road. And I want to record a spotlight on shrubs video today. One that's been long in coming. I pretty much say that about most of my videos anyways, but this one's especially so because it's a plant that I finally learned how to somewhat confidently identify against some of its, at least one of its very close relatives. And this is the hairy Ceanothus. This is Ceanothus oliganthus, variety oliganthus. Ceanothus oliganthus, variety oliganthus, is an evergreen shrub in the Buckthorn family, the Rhamnaceae. A prolific spring bloomer, and quite a treat to see while you're hiking in your local foothill and mountain chaparral. We're about an elevation of about 4,000 feet above sea level, and hairy Ceanothus, or hairy lilac, is quite a delightful plant to see. Very prolific bloomer during the spring months, and very heavily visited by pollinating flies and bees and other insects. As you can see here, this plant is full of pollinating insects. So, I mentioned that this is a plant that can be very hard to identify confidently. Well, here's why. There's a very close relative that has nearly identical features, and that's Ceanothus tomentosus. And I've really had a difficult time telling them apart. But I feel pretty confident, especially based on one of my favorite plant field guides, especially here in the Orange County region, called Wildflowers of Orange County in the Santa Ana Mountains. An absolute must-have for the amateur and even more advanced botanist who likes to refresh him or herself. So Ceanothus tomentosus and Ceanothus oliganthus are two very closely related and very similar species. So that begs the question, how do you tell them apart? Well, what I'm about to tell you is not always 100% foolproof. Bear with me. But I think I'm really pretty darn confident that I'm looking at the right shrub. So Ceanothus oliganthus, variety oliganthus, and Ceanothus tomentosus have nearly identical leaves, or at least the way they look. So the leaf on Ceanothus oliganthus, and of course the leaf on Ceanothus tomentosus, is relatively small, larger in shadier locations where there's more moisture, or sometimes deeper on in the bush because surface area needs to be increased to gain more sunlight particles. But you see here, the leaves are broader at the base and narrower towards the tip, and they have slightly serrated edges, so they have little teeth along the edge of the leaves. And like a lot of related Ceanothus or wild lilacs, they often have 1 to 3 main leaf veins coming from the base. So Ceanothus oliganthus, what I'm looking at here, and Ceanothus tomentosus are both plants that have that feature. The leaves are broader at the base, teeth along the edges, and narrower towards the tip. Not usually super acute, not super pointy tipped, maybe a little more blunt tipped, as you can see here. Not extremely pointy tipped. The newer leaves that are just opening up on this year's growth tend to be shinier and the older leaves tend to be a little duller. As you can kind of see here, this one's a little shinier. As you can see, it's kind of got some shine in the camera. These ones have a little less sheen. So, if the leaves are that similar on oliganthus and tomentosus, how do you tell them apart? Well, this is not always 100%. Not always 100% going to tell you. But if the teeth on the edges of the leaves are sticky, then you're going to be looking at Ceanothus tomentosus most of the time. If the leaf edges are not sticky, then you're looking at Ceanothus oliganthus. And I'm touching some of these leaves, and there's no sticky texture at the edge of the leaves. Sometimes the edge of the leaves can have like a little glandular looking thing on the end of them, but yeah, there's no stickiness on the edge of these leaves. So even the newer leaves that are more robust and moist don't really have a stickiness to them. So I'm looking at Ceanothus oliganthus. Now, sometimes Ceanothus oliganthus might occasionally have some stickiness, according to Fred M. Roberts and Robert Allen, but that's just very rarely the case. So if you do touch a leaf that doesn't have any stickiness on it, then you know you're looking at Ceanothus oliganthus. If it has some stickiness to it, most likely going to be Ceanothus tomentosus. There might be a couple of Ceanothus oliganthus like that, but if it's not sticky at the edge of the leaves, you can be pretty confident you're looking at oliganthus. And there are at least two varieties of Ceanothus oliganthus, both of which may be found here in the San Bernardino Mountains. One of which I don't think is as common, but the most common one is variety oliganthus, the topic of this video. And first off, I want to start off by, I'm actually going to go kind of in reverse. Normally I talk about the flowers before I talk about the fruit. But the fruit are these chambered seed capsules that upon drying out in maturity will burst open and shoot the seeds all over the place, every year causing more seeds to accumulate in the soil seed bank. So that when a fire comes tearing through here, the seeds get scarified, they receive minerals from the ashen plant material and dirt, and germinate into new Ceanothus seedlings. And pretty much all of our Ceanothus plants basically do that. And Ceanothus oliganthus is no exception. So their seed capsules are they have these kind of a little bit of wordiness to them, and they have these three crests around them that are very conspicuous. That's Ceanothus oliganthus variety oliganthus. And for the sake of Ceanothus oliganthus variety serratiatus, the other variety that's found here in Cleveland National Forest, their seed capsules don't have those obvious three finned crests on them. So if you see a Ceanothus like this with the lack of three fin crests, you're looking at gym brush. I don't know where that name came from, but that's Ceanothus oliganthus variety serratiatus. Ceanothus oliganthus variety oliganthus, obvious three fins on the crest of the seed capsule. And they're pretty small. And again, they burst open, release the seeds. And then this is where the similarities between Ceanothus oliganthus and Ceanothus tomentosus come back into play, is that they both have variety oliganthus and Ceanothus tomentosus both have their fruits warty with the three crests on them. So using the seed capsules will not tell you the difference between tomentosus and oliganthus variety oliganthus. It'll just tell you the difference between either variety oliganthus and tomentosus versus Ceanothus oliganthus variety serratiatus. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now we're going to go backtrack to the flowers. One of the most obvious features of this plant, especially in late winter to mid-spring, right now, late March, these things are exploding like crazy. So we have these beautiful, beautiful panicles of anywhere from light blue to deep purplish blue flowers. And they do on this species do give off a slight fragrance that, when these plants are in mass, is somewhat noticeable. It's not very heavily perfumed, but it is enough to where it can be noticeable. And it's not like a really perfumey smell. It's more of a subtle, almost kind of like a pear blossom kind of smell, a little bit, if you want to call it like that. But they grow on these loose panicles of, small panicles of beautiful light blue to deep purplish blue flowers that are just absolutely outstanding and are just a cause for celebration. And the gem brush Ceanothus oliganthus variety serratiatus also has basically identical flowers. Ceanothus tomentosus also has very similar flowers as well. Light to deep purplish blue. So flowers might not tell you so much. The only clue there might be is that maybe Ceanothus oliganthus, both varieties, might not be quite as crowded as Ceanothus tomentosus, but to me that's of really little importance because these are still pretty densely packed plants with fully engaged flowers. So I'm not really going to be using that as a point of contention, a point of identification between these two beautiful shrubs. So one thing is Ceanothus oliganthus tends to grow higher up than Ceanothus tomentosus. Ceanothus oliganthus tends to replace tomentosus as you go up the elevation range of the mountains. So Ceanothus tomentosus is found lower down, and oliganthus is higher up. And of course, the typical habitat for Ceanothus, voila, what a surprise, chaparral. But as you see, they add a very beautiful color to the chaparral. In fact, I can see a lot of Ceanothus oliganthus on the hillside. I could see little spots of light blue color on the hillside. That's more of this blooming. So you can see this plant from a long distance away and know that you're looking at either Ceanothus tomentosus, Ceanothus oliganthus, or in some cases you might also be looking at Ceanothus papillosus, which has been known to grow in this area, and one example of which I've seen higher up on Los Pinos Ridge. But I haven't seen it in this area per se, so I can't use that as an identifying or a contrasting shrub. But Ceanothus papillosus tends to have more of an arching branch structure, and the leaves are much narrower and curled downward from the middle. So, and the leaves are very warty, hence warty Ceanothus papillosus. We have another species of Ceanothus here. This is Ceanothus Crassufolia variety Crassifolius, and that's a plant that can be found growing with it with Ceanothus oliganthus in the chaparral. However, this plant is very easy to tell apart. It's one of the easier species of Ceanothus to tell apart, as it has white flowers, and these leaves are much thicker and usually curled. In the shade they're not as curled, but in the open sun the leaves are curled or revolute, as they say. Leaves are oppositely arranged. As you can see here on Ceanothus crassifolius, this axil is opposite from this axil on the stem, whereas on Ceanothus oliganthus, Ceanothus tomentosus, everything's alternate. You can see the way the little spurs alternate along the stem. So again, chaparral loving plants. The Ceanothus oliganthus can also grow very erect and almost tree-like. I've seen some specimens along the Mount Lukens truck trail in the Angeles National Forest last week. Some of them even, one or a couple of them even had single stems and shaped like small trees that are about 10 feet tall. So they can be quite upright. I don't believe Ceanothus tomentosus is known to do that, to my knowledge. They tend to be more of a shrubbier stature. But yeah, these can get much taller than this. Ceanothus oliganthus variety oliganthus. So there's some spots along Mount Lukens truck trail in Angeles National Forest in LA County, where you'll see in the shade, especially on shadier north-facing slopes, in woodland and chaparral, very tall, mature, thick chaparral, these grow up pretty tall, taller than your head. So be on the lookout in my description for the full range of Ceanothus, oliganthus, variety oliganthus. And one book that has helped me, I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning of the video, is Fred M. Roberts and Robert Allen's Wildflowers of Orange County in the Santa Ana Mountains. If you're a wildflower and native plant enthusiast, it has a lot of our native flowering plants. It doesn't include the oaks. It doesn't include our oaks, but it includes most of our very conspicuous flowering plants and some of our rarer plants. It's still an extremely informative read, great pictures, and very detailed explanations on how you can tell some of these plants apart. That is how I was able to tell Ceanothus oliganthus from Ceanothus tomentosus, because of the fact that they mention the sticky leaf tips or sticky leaf edges on Ceanothus tomentosus. So for a person who likes to get for a person like me who's very interested in our local botany, very passionate about it, I find that book is an extremely valuable read. I've gone through 2 copies of it already. Well, I'm on my second copy. It's in really good condition. It's in my backpack too. I have it with me. So that's gonna basically do it. Ceanothus oliganthus, variety oliganthus, hairy lilac. So, like I said, hard to tell apart from Ceanothus tomentosus, but well worth the time to investigate it up close. So that's going to do it for my spotlight on shrubs. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it helpful in identifying. And go on Amazon and try to see if you can get a copy of Fred M. Roberts and Robert Allen's book. You'll be very, very, very happy that you did. And no, I'm not a paid spokesperson. This is just my actual opinion of it. But it will help you separate a lot of these hard to tell apart closely related species. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on another Spotlight episode, and see you down the way.